Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Airspeed's Avatar Rewatch video. This one's going to be for Book 3 Fire Episode 3, The Painted Lady. This one is animated by Moi Animation, and yeah, similar to the headband, I think this is an episode that I really enjoy. I think it's a very fun and interesting episode, but I can appreciate how it's kind of like a personal favorite of mine, and that in general, it's not the most, well fan received episode. I think most people don't hate it, but I think most people would rate it much lower than I do. It is a personal favorite of mine. I think it's kind of the, almost like the forgotten really good Katara kind of centric episode, in that there are some really good Katara moments in this. And then of course myself, as a fan of like the spiritual aspect of things, the introduction of the Painted Lady and then seeing her at the end is obviously this really cool moment that just kind of adds this, like, that's actually a really cool moment for Katara to have that kind of spiritual moment like herself. Like, Sokka's been taken to the spirit world by Heibai, Aang is the Avatar, lots of spiritual stuff going on there. But Katara, like, just to get this kind of connection of like, she helped this town on this river, that this spirit kind of looks over enough that the spirit actually came to her to thank her for what she did, and basically affecting so much change in this place. So while it's not exactly the most important episode, I think it has a lot of cool ideas that present interesting things about the Fire Nation. Like in the last episode, there was that kind of important thing about like the history and why the people of the Fire Nation think the way they do about things. Here we get the idea of like, the Fire Nation military still treats a lot of its own citizens quite poorly. It's really only the kind of more well-off noble families and the royal family itself that are in this amazing position within the Fire Nation. For the most part, it's just that they have really strong technology and a really good military. That is why they are the powerhouse that they are. In that this is a Fire Nation town they come to here on the Zhonghui River, and it's kind of so sad to just see this town like this, where it's a fishing village that is slowly over time falling apart, because obviously the pollution is making it so that anything you're taking up doesn't exactly seem all that edible, and then it's obviously the supply is gradually going away and away because they put in this Fire Nation factory there in the last couple of years that's just ruining basically what this town is about. So Team Avatar arriving there, and the plot of the episode really being this kind of conflict between Sokka and Katara, I think is really well done, because it's I suppose Sokka and Katara both making key mistakes, but also presenting important points of like, Sokka almost like forgets the idea of like, when he says to avoid this town because of the schedule, the reason they're in this position, the reason that they have an invasion force, is because of moments like this, where they've stopped at the town, they've helped the people there and formed an ally with them. That he's almost forgotten that the invasion plan is almost completely made up of people they've met along the way, and if they didn't stop to meet them along the way, who would they actually have? And this is another one of those situations. So he kind of is a bit misguided there. Obviously you can appreciate him wanting to keep the schedule so that they arrive at the invasion location in time, but obviously it's the opposite for Katara, where yes, she potentially, puts the importance of this town above everything else, but she, I think, prioritizes the idea that like, them as like the kind of heroes fighting on the good side of this war, they have to help people along the way to kind of make it clear that, they've been doing good along the way, they forming allies along the way. It's a good thing for them to do, to help these people. Similar to the fact that they kind of took a break for Aang to kind of help those kids express themselves, this is, Katara stopping to just help this one village. And obviously it initially starts out as just there's a lot of sick people. She, uses her waterbending healing, then steals medicine from the Fire Nation soldiers overlooking the town, and eventually it comes out that, Aang gets in on, Katara's plan. He finds out that it's her acting as the Painted Lady, and they both destroy the factory, which is stopping the pollution and gives them the opportunity at the end of the episode to, spend a good amount of time there just cleaning the river and getting it back to the way it should be, and making this fishing town effective again. In that, I suppose the mistake Katara makes in this episode, as kind of Sokka points out, is that yeah, like whoever's helping them isn't really helping them, because they just are expecting this kind of miracle to happen. If they just expect miracles to happen, then they won't do anything themselves to solve the problem. Admittedly, he joked about, someone should take out the factory, but that's kind of what needed to happen. With the factory still in place, there was really nothing that town, being so isolated, could do just on its own. If they tried to clean the river, it would just get polluted again, and there was nothing they could do because of the control of the Fire Nation military. So once the factory was down, it had to be a case of like Katara switching and really trying to point out to them all that you guys need to help yourselves. I've done everything I can to help you here in terms of healing people who are obviously sick right now, but now that that's passed, you need to make your town work kind of on its own without a reliance on the Painted Lady. But I do like that this town did have this kind of spirit that's related to like the lore of its own town, of like, the Painted Lady, this river spirit. We obviously know later on that the Painted Lady is a very similar case to Iroh, in that she used to be a human, and she obviously did some sort of a spirit transfer thing where, she left her physical body behind and has over time become an actual spirit. You could also maybe include Malu from the card game in here as well, as like a potential character who is almost like rumored to be like that. So just this idea of like humans becoming spirits over time and being these kind of guardian spirits. The Kamurakage as well would be another example of this. Really good example. I can't believe I didn't say them kind of before some of the other examples I gave, but the Kamurakage from the comics are another example of this. So just humans becoming spirits, really, really interesting concept. Ultimately, if they had, I suppose, maybe put all this in place beforehand, maybe you could have seen an aspect of this episode being like telling like the legend of the Painted Lady and showing a little bit of flashback, and maybe at the end Katara discovering the truth of all of this, and she meets this person who's become a spirit and has to relate to the group this idea that humans can become spirits, and just kind of leave you pondering this question of like, wow, humans can become spirits, can it be the other way around type thing. But there's some great moments along the way. In a way, part of the potential problem with this episode is just that there isn't a small story with Zuko. We don't really cut back to him at all. It's just laser focused on this episode, which is cool in that we just get these really cool 22 minutes with, a huge Katara focus, but it also means that Zuko is just kind of left on his own out there and he hasn't had like the main plot so far, so him not being included in an episode is kind of a little weird, but overall, not too badly missed, because I do like this episode a lot. What else? I suppose Katara's big moment. I really like the moment where, Sokka's arguing with her, like, you've got them into this mess, what's going to happen, you're going to put the villagers at risk, we should have just left and not done anything. And Katara just, basically shouts at Sokka and says, like, I can never turn my back on people who need me. And it's a very character-defining line that I really, really like, and it kind of shows the writers get Katara, that this is exactly who she is at a base level. She would never let something like this happen to this town. She has to do something, regardless of what it does to the group's schedule or anything like that. And it's because of that I like this episode so much. Whereas, like, 308, The Puppet Master is a good episode, but it's primarily for like Hama and bloodbending, more so than I think Katara herself, like as a character, even though it is kind of her episode. And then the Southern Raiders is more about, obviously, the flashback about what actually happened to her mother. And yes, it's about Katara at this point in time, and Katara and Zuko's relationship and becoming friends by the end, but it's not really necessarily about like a defining kind of character, like who Katara is as a character. Towards the end it is, but like I like that this episode is just, this is relating back to like episodes like Imprisoned from early on in book one, that coming back to it in the last season, she's still the same person that she was before, willing to, you know, stop things to help people along the way. And it's an interesting one because when she comes back, the villagers are initially annoyed at her for lying to them, that basically making it seem like the painted lady was this real thing that they were being, you know, affected by, but it was just her, you know, basically tricking them. And I like that Sokka, after being in a way like the opposition to Katara for a lot of the episode, he's the one to stand up for her and be like, why are you like giving out to her? You should be thanking her because of everything she did for you and the position that you're now in, able to kind of be yourselves again. And of course it's, you know, Toph with the little joke line of maybe we should clean the river, that ends up being the thing that you know, distracts them and realizes that, yeah, with the factory gone, if we clean the river, we can get back to living kind of healthily again. People aren't going to be getting sick because they're drinking like polluted water. They're not going to be eating, you know, mutated like fish and clams or whatever they were. And at least the town can survive and maybe go somewhere after this point in time. And then I suppose there's potentially also the idea of like, now that they've kind of, I suppose Team Avatar have inspired the town to like help themselves, the painted lady now is in a maybe position where she can actually maybe do something herself to help. But I suppose that's the interesting kind of point with this episode with regards to the painted lady, of like, she didn't do anything, but if she's the guardian and is known by a lot of people as the guardian of like this river, what does she actually do? Did she ever do something in the first place to really assist them, and why doesn't she actually actively assist them? It's something with the spirits that we still to this day don't really know, in that like they hold this position where they're like seen as legends by humans in certain places, in terms of reverent kind of beings that we look up to, in terms of like Heibai is like a forest spirit of that specific forest, the painted lady is for, you know, this place, yet they seem like they're legends, and we don't really know like why they've become legends, in terms of like what did they actively do to make those legends happen, and why don't they continue to do that anymore. Because obviously what we know of spirits is that they tend to not involve themselves with humans. Most of them actively dislike humans, so why protect a place that is kind of fundamental to humans? Because like spirits don't seem to need to like eat, yet they seem to respect nature and animals and stuff like that a lot. So what's going on here? What's the connection, and so on? But yeah, a lot of fun towards the end of the episode. The big scene is obviously the whole team gets involved in Katara, you know, being the painted lady, and just using the bending, you know, the musical instruments, Appa, Momo, as the special effects for this big moment, as, you know, basically Katara as the painted lady is going to scare the Fire Nation soldiers away, and use the legend of the painted lady, that it make the Fire Nation soldiers believe there is actually a spirit protecting this area, and then they won't go back because they know that there's a spirit there. I like that idea, that they just get involved and completely get in on this idea, and, you know, Aang does some awesome bending, and it makes Katara as the painted lady look like this unbelievably kind of powerful kind of being, just being able to like float across the water, primarily water bending, just destroy things at will with air bending, and then like the effects of like Toph doing the pounding on the ground to make it the earth shake a bit, Sokka doing the, you know, the sound effects, and Appa doing similar stuff as well. Just really, really cool little idea within the episode to give everyone something to do, that they all, by the end of the episode, do get involved with this. Plus you have, I suppose, the kind of gag throughout the entire episode of like the main guy in the village, the Doc Shu, and was it Bushi or something like that at the end, that it's the same guy, he just changes hats. And for the most part, they just accept it, but it's been clear that there's been something building up within Aang the entire episode, of just like, he's been waiting for a moment to just completely get this guy, just blatantly changing personality in front of him, and he finally gets it, and the guy still doesn't acknowledge it. So just this idea of this weird multiple personality syndrome guy here, who his different personalities all have a different job within the village. One's a river cleaner, one's a shopkeeper, and then one runs the boat. So just I thought a fun little guy to just have this guy in the village, and almost imply in a way that like the whole idea of like the water being polluted, the mutated fish, that maybe it's had a bad effect on him, and this is how it's manifested itself in him. But fun little character, and overall, as I said, enjoyable episode to just give a little extra context in terms of like our whole this arc, this group of episodes at the start of this season before the invasion, kind of being the learning about the Fire Nation arc. What we learn here is, of course, that the Fire Nation are, just as kind of cruel in a way to their own people in terms of polluting this village and not caring about it at all. That, in pursuit of their overall goals, they kind of forget about the little people that they have. That the Fire Lord Ozai isn't really caring about his, subjects in a way. And I think the big thing that I'm getting out of these early Book 3 episodes, rewatching them again, is that, in a way, this is kind of what Book 1 could have been. I'm not saying that there's a massive problem with Book 1 and its early episodes or even middle episodes, but just imagine if all of Book 1 was the same kind of caliber of episodes to this, in that if every one of those episodes was the same level of quality. There was great humor in every single one of them. There was a cool dynamic of a spirit or something like that related to every one of them. And at times, of course, Book 1 did that. The King of Omashu is a great episode. It's incredibly funny, and you get the whole idea of Boomy, that connection. That's really, really cool. It's almost like, imagine the Great Divide if they committed to their idea a little bit more and introduced a few more concepts. That's to me the difference between, say, making the comparison between early Book 1, some of the kind of more fillery episodes, and then early Book 3 and calling these episodes fillery, in that I feel like the characters, we know them better, they're interacting off each other a lot better here. There's much more, I think, unique ideas because it's more of a direct, we're in the Fire Nation now, whereas I think a lot of the Book 1 episodes were just wait, actually, where are we? Because we're for the most part, we were never really informed a lot of the time about where exactly we were in those episodes. Whereas at least here it's kind of clear we're on the different fire islands, and we're gradually getting closer to the main sections of the Fire Nation. And so we're seeing the more kind of isolated areas, and that here's a school out here. Here is this river town. And obviously this is kind of where we're going right now. Next, we're going to get to the place where the Swordmaster is, and so on going forward. Whereas in the earlier episodes, it was kind of just here's a place, and it somehow relates to an Earth Kingdom village, and there's this boat out in the water, but where exactly are we? And you can sort of see a bit of the issue of just the lack of connection to the place that we're actually in. Whereas here it's clear, this is the Fire Nation, this is the enemy territory, basically, but we're actually learning that they're people too. Here's their schools, here's just a more isolated village, that we're fighting for these people as well, kind of type thing. That, these people will be better off with the Fire Nation under better control as well, with the war not going on, and a lack of requirement for all this kind of military stuff and the factories. It would assist towns like this as well. And of course the idea with the school in the previous episode that, they'd actually be learning the correct stuff. Freedom of expression would be a thing again, and everything would be better. But yeah, that's my thoughts on this episode, The Painted Lady, a personal favourite of mine. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the episode, as well as what I had to say about it today. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.